I'm Jordan.
I'm Sheridan.
I'm Elizabeth O'Rourke.
And this is the Elizabeth O'Rourke episode.
We are so excited to speak with you today, Elizabeth. Elizabeth O'Rourke has written over 15 books. She used to actually be in medical writing, but she left that profession to be able to craft wonderful stories with grumpy alpha male heroes and the women who love them. And we're so excited to just chat about your upcoming book release, your work, and all the fun things today.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you have actually a new book that comes out today. It is My Favorite Bad Decision, Age Gap, Enemies to Lovers. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
So it's so weird to talk about a book that you wrote a while ago because like now I'm writing the sequel to this book. So I'm like, yeah, what was that book about? Kit Fisher has been forced to go climb Kilimanjaro because it's like this series of tasks that her father is making her, like gauntlet that she's going through in order to assume her father's publishing company. And he's making her go cover the climb for one of his magazines. And then, of course, at the airport, she runs into Miller West, who dated and dumped her older sister a decade prior. And Miller is her like end all be all enemy. She hates him for what he did to her sister. And of course, she actually sort of liked him too. So. And then they're climbing.
This is interesting because in The Devil in the Deep Blue Sea, I was actually going to talk to you about this. This is one of the only times I have ever read a sibling like switch romance where I have ever liked it. And I was going to say, how do you approach that? I read it and I was like, no, this makes total sense. Like, I love this. Like, how do you approach writing something like that?
I don't think that I'd be able to pull it off if it was like in this book, you know, they dated a decade prior, right? And the sister still kind of has a crush on him. But if they were still together, I don't think I could pull it off because it would be really hard to justify. Nobody's going to like that heroine, right? And we tend as readers to crap on the heroines in ways that we would let the hero get away with. But so I wouldn't be able to pull it off. But I like a little bit of forbidden. And in both these books, that one and this one, she's not actually with the character in The Devil in the Deep Blue Sea. You know, like they're testing the idea out, but she's not sleeping with him. Right. And same with this. And in fact, in this book, her sister is already married to someone else. She just thinks of Miller as the one who got away. So it's a conflict with the character and it adds a touch of forbidden, but it's not like full on, like, you know.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that because I do feel like the line in most romances in any form of a taboo is always like what the second is involved is when you're like, oh.
Yeah. And that was really hard. That was really hard with The Devil in the Deep Blue Sea, right? Because they are actually sharing a hotel room.
Right.
But if I had her sleeping with him, then I would have just alienated like a solid 30% of the readers.
Yeah, it is so true. And I think it's interesting that you say that because Jordan and I, we always joke we're actually way harder on male main characters than we are on female main characters. Yes. And we typically tend to forgive our female main characters that we read.
You guys are in the minority.
We're just always like, for us, we're like, he needs all the hoops. She can do whatever she wants. Like if she comes around to it, fine, but he needs the hoops.
No, in fact, I've got an editor who will go through my book and she'll be like, just so you know, people are going to hate her because she said this. And she's always like, the male could walk into the room, take a dump on the floor and walk out. And all the readers would be like, oh, that's okay. He meant well. He had a hard childhood. The female can't say 2 words wrong without everybody going nuts. So you guys are in the minority.
Yeah.
We never talked about that.
Yay, you.
Yeah.
I think it's because we always approach it from like the friend or us. And I'm like, if that was my friend, I'd be like, do what you want. Like, live your dream. It's on him.
True. Very true. Okay. So speaking of, like you said, you like to have always an aspect of forbidden in your books. One of my absolute favorite tropes is a second chance, angst, pining. I love that combination. You write that so well. Like in The Summer We Fell, the dynamic between the main characters in that book, like Luke, so good. And Juliet, obsessed. So I wanted to ask you, when you're reading books, is that one of your favorite tropes because you write it so well? We'd love to hear more about it.
So yeah, like in romance, I want like a whole lot of pining and it's got to be a slow burn because I just generally just don't believe in, like love at first sight.
Yeah.
So, and yeah. So, yeah, that's, I like maximum pining.
Yes, we do too. We also agree we're not fans of insta love. We
Yeah.
want the development, pining, angst, eat it up.
Yeah.
Also, your books have just such great banter between the characters. How do you go about crafting the connection between them?
I think, so the thing is, like, I'm an introvert, right? But I like carry on all these like imaginary conversations in my head because I'm not talking to anyone else. And so I come up with a banter like first. It's like I'll have an idea of like what these two people would say to each other. Like in this book, the older sister is in this terrible marriage, and in the book I'm writing now, she's going to end up with her stepbrother. And they're adults, so it's not like it's not especially taboo. But so even when I was writing my favorite bad decision, I was kind of in the back of my head, like picturing Charlie and the stepbrother and Marin talking, and I was like, oh, Charlie would totally say this, ha ha ha, and I would just kind of write it down off to the side, and then that always ends up being like the part of my books that I like the best is the stuff that I just thought of randomly before I even kind of had established who the characters were. So, yeah. And then I just kind of build the characters around, a lot of times I build the characters around like the sarcastic shit that they said. Like, like, okay, he said this. I mean, therefore he's got to be this kind of person.
That's so interesting. I love hearing about your process where that actually comes first. And then you craft some of the characters around that. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, in the summer series, I think, like I said, you write angst so well. A lot of the books in that series pair angst with another trope. I wanted to ask you, how do you go about crafting that kind of emotional tension where it really pulls at the reader's heartstrings as you're kind of rooting for these characters to get together?
Oh, I honestly, like, I don't know. I mean, the thing is that I'll write a book and like with The Summer We Fell, I wrote it and then I like took it apart, right? Like I wrote it, I restructured it, I wrote it, I did chapters from his point of view, and then I changed it so they weren't from his point of view. And I just go and I'll read the book. That's what makes it me so slow, but I'll read my book starting from the beginning. And then if I'm like, this is boring me, this doesn't have enough tension, then I start from the beginning all over again and start reading. And I just keep going until I find a place where I'm like, okay, it's not working anymore. And now I've got to add something. And so I just keep layering in stuff.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that's cool. That makes sense. So it sounds like you did a couple revisions of The Summer We Fell then, because you said like you changed up quite a bit.
I do a million revisions of every book. Like I wrote A Deal with the Devil. I wrote almost all of it in like 5 days, but I spent a year rewriting it. So I don't think that the changes were anything so dramatic, but with The Summer We Fell, that was really hard, right? Because there's like the then piece and the now piece. And I didn't want, like when you're reading the then piece, you kind of like, like most people just want to stay in the then piece because they want to know what's going to happen next in that story, and same with the now. So it was like having to go through and like structure each chapter so that the end of that chapter is somehow connected to the future, right? Like then you go to the future and you see that whatever just happened in this past, you're drawing these connections. So yeah, that one was tough. That was harder than the other ones.
We loved how you did that.
Yeah, and it actually makes me think. So I had just started Parallel, which is one of your, like, for lack of a better word, time traveling, I think is the best way to put it, series. Do you approach that with the same kind of concept where you're like, you almost have to have two completely different story maps of two different lives and make them connect by chapter?
Like with that one, that one was a lot easier just because as a reader, I think when you're reading Parallel, you are rooting automatically for Nick, right? Like she's engaged to this other guy, Jeff, who's a total dolt. But like for the bulk of readers, like you're rooting for Nick. You're like, Quinn, ditch this guy, go to Nick, go to the hot doctor. And so I think that it was easier with that one because in the past segment, she's like hooking up with Nick. She's marrying Nick. She's having all these amazing moments with Nick that you kind of want to see as a reader. So that was a little easier.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's such an interesting concept that when I started diving into it, I was like, okay.
So something that we absolutely love about your male main characters, like for example, Josh in The Devil in the Deep Blue Sea and Luke from The Summer We Fell, is how they show their love. Like they show their love through actions, acts of service is a love language. They're taking care of the female main character. And that is one of our favorite male main character in a book traits. Like that's how we want love to be displayed, you know, like actions behind words. What makes a perfect or a good male main character for you in the books that you write? Like, what are you aiming to write your character as?
I think that I generally like, I mean, which probably is fairly obvious. I like a cranky male character. And I think part of the reason that I like a cranky male character is because if a guy is, and if a guy is super nice to everyone, right? Like if he's like, hey, I love everyone, everyone's great, then it's not really distinguishing his care for her, right? She could be anyone. But like
Yes.
in The Summer We Fell and in The Devil in the Deep Blue Sea, Josh and Luke are both kind of jerks to pretty much everyone, right?
Yes.
They're awful, but they're not awful to her. So you know that he has somehow set her apart, even if he's not saying anything along those lines. So
I love that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I like them cranky, but I also like them kind of like to have like a strong moral base, which sounds like a dorky thing to say, but you know, in all this, like in The Summer We Fell, right? Like Danny is supposed to be the great upstanding kid. And yet he kind of minimizes Juliet. He's awful to her when he finds out about the abuse she suffered. He doesn't stand up for her when she's attacked, when she's biking home. And Luke is like the bad kid, right? And he's the one who, you know, beats the hell out of the guys who did it, who goes after her stepbrother, who he's always the one. And so I love having that in a character where no matter what everyone else is saying about him, you, the reader, know that this is how all men should be.
Completely agreed. We talk about that often too. We want the male main character to be protective of the female character, like show up for her. I also loved what you said, where if they're nice to everybody, where's the distinction?
Yeah.
I positively agree with that. Yeah. We love the grumpy. Yes. Love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Josh and Luke both have that have you eaten energy and way of showing love as well. Do you feel like that also is kind of in that same, like how the grumpy character shows that like caring?
Yeah, and it's so funny. I didn't realize that I had done that because I do that in this book too. Like in My Favorite Bad Decision, that's actually one of the things is they're at each other's throats, and then he's like, they're at the breakfast, they're like in this small tent, right? With like, they're doing this climb with 8 people and there's a dining tent and he's across from her and they're just bitching at each other. And he's like, eat more breakfast. And he's shoving food at her. So that's my thing is men trying to feed me.
You're like, that's honestly a key.
I didn't even realize that honestly, but yeah.
It's honestly interesting too. Because now that we're talking about it, the FMC does this to Hayes too, and is like, you need to eat better. It's like, you need this love. I think that's such an interesting thing because like food can be such a clear way of showing love of.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had not put that together until you guys said that. I think I'm a mom. I've got 3 kids. So like, you know, and they're old enough now that they don't want me hugging them or they don't like discuss their lives with me. And all I can do is feed them. So that's probably.
Yeah. So you're like, that's a part of it. What would you say is the best advice that you've received as an author?
I've mentioned this one before, and it was actually from it's from this book called, I think it was called Superstructure. He's written a bunch of books, but what he said was that there's a moment right at the 50% of every good book, every movie, and it's true. If you go to almost any movie, it's the case. You go to the 50% part, and there's a moment when the main character is generally looking at themselves in a mirror, they're looking at themselves in a window, and they're deciding if they're going to go for it or they're not going to go for it. And I've actually gone to like where I will restructure my entire book. So at the 50% point, is exactly like to the page is when that character is deciding what path she's going to take. And it's either, and you know, she's always going to end up taking the path that's going to lead her to end up with this guy in the end. And I don't know why it works, but it really does work to like make every other piece of the book fall into the right place.
That's really interesting. Like having that decided and then working the story back from that, or making sure the book is set up for that moment. That's really interesting.
I've got this theory that as readers, we kind of intuitively expect things to happen at a certain point, right? And you don't know this, but when it doesn't happen, you're kind of like, when you're reading a book and you're just like, or like something happens, you're like, that was it. And I think a lot of that is because we do have this sense of story structure, and like we kind of know like what should be happening at 3/4 of the book and what should happen at 1/4 of the book. And if it doesn't happen, you don't know why you don't like it, but you're let down by it. And so I think that having that 50% mark kind of keeps everything ticking the right way.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that, because I also think like it's something I never really analyzed about myself, but I also find that as a reader that you start to be like, okay, like the future is here in front of you, like see the choice you have to make. So I do think that like at a point you're like, okay, come on, lady. Like, you know what I mean? Or you just want somebody to turn that leaf. And I think that's a good point, is that at that 50% mark, you've invested all this time in it. And now you're like, okay, I want some rewards here. I want to know we're headed towards the thing that I want.
Right.
So that's interesting.
Like in the fourth book in the summer series, she's super cranky. She is like definitely like one of the crankiest females I've written. And I write a lot of cranky females. She's very cranky. And this contractor who likes her is like so like wonderful. He's open. He just adores her. And at a certain point, like, like I wanted her to kind of stay cranky, but I was like, all right, at the 50% part, she's got to give him something back, because otherwise he's just an idiot to keep trying. Right.
Yeah.
So.
That's a very good point.
It's relatable too, because I feel like in our personal lives as the reader, we're often put in these positions where we have these decisions where you have to choose one path, like one way or the other. So maybe that's an internal push too, for when you hit that part in the story, you're like, okay, you need to either change or take a step forward, make that decision. That's really interesting.
Okay, so when you approach a series, do you already know what couples you want to end up together beforehand? Or is it ever that the couples kind of surprise you and you kind of form them along the way as you get to know them?
Yeah, I never have anything planned at all. And in fact, like with this series, the couple that I'm writing now, the stepbrother and and the sister, like I knew that I wanted to put them together, but it just wasn't working. It wasn't working. And I almost just scrapped it. I was like, no, you know what? I see them with different people. And it really like, it's finally come together, but yeah, I have no idea what I'm doing. I just came up with this idea. And actually, like with this book, like I had an entirely different story in mind. Like it was going to take place in Manhattan, and it was going to be this and this and this. And then I was just like, I'm not into this at all. And so now it's taking place in another like thing, and there's like a magical realism element. It's a 100% different story. Ooh. So yeah, sometimes it just, whatever I had in mind just does not work.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is that there was a part of me that was, because this book is being recorded in July that I'm writing now. And I don't normally write on such a tight timeline, but I got this narrator whose name I can't reveal, but he's amazing. And I was like, I am not giving that up. I've been waiting for this for a year. And so I had to hustle, and I was kind of like, no, you can't rewrite the story at this late date. But yeah, I did. Unfortunately, it seems to be working. We'll see.
That's exciting.
That's awesome, gosh, especially for audiobook girlies. Yeah, I was like, audiobook girlies have like key people that they like, so I could totally see that if you get the person, you're like, never mind, this will happen.
Honestly, like I wanted to make this stepbrother British, and because I had this narrator, I was like, oh no, I'm not going to do it because he's not British. So I changed the character just because of this narrator, because I wanted him so badly.
Oh my gosh. I know you can't say, but now I'm like, okay, when the audiobook comes out, I'm like, who is it? Yeah. So does a character ever surprise you then? Like you've got a plan for a character and then you're writing them and you're like, this doesn't feel right. And do you ever take them on a completely different journey?
Yeah, actually, again, with the book that I'm writing now, the stepbrother is kind of a douche. He's a little bit like Hayes, right? He drinks a lot, he sleeps around, he's terrible. And I was kind of struggling with how to redeem him. And then all of a sudden, like, I just like made him like a completely different guy on the inside. He's just kind of like like a lost soul. So yeah,
Mm,
they do. He's ended up being completely different than I had intended him to be.
it's really interesting.
Okay, so you also used to be a medical writer. What
Yeah.
made you make this pivot and kind of change to romance?
So I was a medical writer, and then I stayed home because I had little kids, and I mean, to be perfectly honest, like I started reading like indie books right when it was called kind of new, right? And I don't think I would have even tried it. Like I always wanted to try to write a book, but and this will sound terrible, but I think I just read a couple that were in a row that were really bad. And if I had read a bunch that were super, super good, I'd be like, I could never do this. I would never like I loved
Yeah.
Twilight, right? And I was like, I could never write this book. But I read a couple that were really bad. And I was like, you know what? These books suck. I could write a book that sucks equal on par with this. It was like I didn't
That's
really
so
have the
funny.
confidence to do it, but I was like, okay, well, anybody could write this. So, so I tried it.
So in that, did you have like, do you kind of see it and think like, oh, I know how I'd rewrite this, or I know like the character I would take out of this, or did it like just inspire you to start brainstorming?
Um, I think that I don't even remember how I ended up just like coming up with like my very first idea for it. And it wasn't that I was thinking about rewriting their books. I was just
Right.
like, oh my God, this plot is ridiculous. Like these characters are this girl is so dumb. So, like, and it was just, it was at the very, very start of like the whole indie thing. And these authors that I'm referring to are no longer publishing. So for like, I think it was kind of an anomaly. And I've read a ton of amazing indie books, but I just happened to get lucky, and I read like a few in a row that were really bad, and just like had ridiculous plots and ridiculous characters, and it was they were unlikable. And it was one of the those books that, especially like early in indie, you'd be like, this girl is a virgin, and all of a sudden she's like doing something like wild, like within the first 15 pages, and she's like a 28-year-old virgin, and all of a sudden she's this sex expert. It was like that kind of thing
Yeah.
where I was like, all right, this is crazy.
You're like, that's not realistic. Okay, so in some of your books, you write dual POV, but then some also have single POV. How do you kind of decide when you're writing out a story, how you want the POVs to be written out?
So, I mean, I know everybody prefers dual POV, right? But I actually, as a reader, prefer single POV because I like that tension of not knowing. Like, you generally kind of know that he likes her, but I like that tension of like having to read into these tiny gestures, right? And he's got like this little like twitch in his jaw when somebody says something rude to her, and you, the reader, having to interpret it all. And I love that like tension of not knowing and the excitement of it. But there are certain books where you kind of have to know, right? Like like especially when the character has a lot going on. I don't, you probably haven't read it, but I read this book, Waking Olivia, where she is this runner and she is running in her sleep. She's on a cross country team.
Mm.
She's got this condition where and she doesn't sleepwalk. She actually runs in her sleep, and she has no idea what she's doing. So you had to have somebody have an outside perspective. So it's
Mm.
generally that. And
Yeah.
it's generally like when the female character is pretty psycho, I need to have the male perspective to kind of balance it out.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. Also, it definitely builds up in that angst, like you said, because you
Yeah.
write angst so well. When you're looking at did they tense their jaw? Do they have these little mannerisms? That's in the buildup,
Right.
for
Yeah.
the building up that
I
tension.
love that. Like, everybody always talks about that moment in Pride and Prejudice, right? Where he kind of clenches his hand, right?
Yes,
But
because he just touched her. Yeah, oh, he touched her hand. Yeah, yeah.
But the thing is, the reason that they love that so much is because they didn't just have 15 minutes of Darcy sitting around saying like, God, I love her so much. I don't know what to do. Like he's this mystery, right? And so you have to just like cherish these little tiny things and you're looking for them. But if you just watched him like pouting for 20 minutes about how Elizabeth Bennet won't give him the time of day, that little hand thing would be like, ugh, whatever. So.
Yeah.
So true.
It also makes me think of like Ben in the Devil series too, because there were so many times I was like, I want Ben's point of view so bad. But then when I went back and reread it, I was like, you know what? There were so many times I was like angry on her behalf unjustifiably. And then something would happen and I'd be like, well, damn.
That's the thing. I think, especially too, when it's a situation where you really you don't know what is going on with the male character. And a lot of times you'll be like, yeah, but he's such a good guy. He wouldn't do that. And then you as a reader kind of get mad at the female, right? Because you're
Yeah.
like, oh, come on, you know he
Yeah.
wouldn't. So it has to be like in The Devil You Know with Ben and Gemma. I needed to set it up so that you were like, Ben is such a great guy, but what the,
Yeah.
how dare he? Because otherwise you'd be like, come on, Gemma. Like, because you
Yeah.
would know exactly what's going on. So
That's especially a good point, especially with like how long he pined, because you get to that part and it's like you do start to feel that way towards Gemma, and then that big thing happens, and you're like, wait a minute, was I wrong?
So I have to ask, when I was reading The Summer We Fell, is the Drew that is her friend in the book, is that Drew from The Devil in the Deep Blue Sea? And then is her lawyer Ben, is that Ben from the Devil series?
Yeah,
oh
because
okay,
because Juliet actually appears in The Devil in Deep Blue Sea. There's a scene where they are in Oahu and they're at the North Shore, and she's out there with the brother and with Six, and she's bored, and then she starts talking to the singer in the sand, and that singer is Juliet. Because at this point,
oh my goodness,
Juliet is this very famous singer, and she's watching. Yeah.
I love that. I love the interworld connected, like the connecting the two series. That's awesome.
So yeah, the funny thing is that I had written A Deal with the Devil, and then I had written a fair amount of The Summer We Fell, and that was going to be the next book in the Devil series. And then I was just like, this book is so dark. Like I can't follow, because The Deal with the Devil has its angsty moments, but it's kind of light. And I was like, okay, this is too dark. I've got to write something entirely different. But I knew that I was eventually going to publish it. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to work Juliet and Luke in.
Oh, that's so cool. I loved it. That was like, I really appreciated that. That was cool.
It's also interesting you say that, because a lot of your characters are working through like trauma, like some form of a trauma in a real and relatable way. How do you map out that trauma and try to deal with it in such a sensitive way? Because they're all so different and can be varying.
So, I generally like I have this character, and then I kind of have to go back, and I'm kind of just like, what's their backstory? And basically, like if they've got like some like real hole in their persona, like some real like thing that they've got to work out, I'm like, all right, what would have created this? And then I'll be like, I'll throw something at it. I'll be like, okay, it's this. And then I'll be like, nope, that's not enough. Nope, that's not enough. And I'll keep going backward. Like my graduate degree was in psychology. Like I originally wanted to be a psychologist. I was terrible at it. But I think that because of that, I kind of just tend to like apply a lot of psychology to the backstory and then a lot of psychology to the forward movement.
Yeah. And it's what I also liked is, especially with Drew's story, you did something so realistic that was also dark, in my opinion, which was like a lot of the ways that her manager would like push coke on her. And it's something that I think is like something that we as people have a perception of the entertainment industry and like kind of have that knowledge, but it's not something you typically ever see brought up. It's like you'll end up dealing with these famous characters and they're magically drug free and magically never touching any of this. And so it was really interesting to see it applied and see the pressure applied that way, in a way that felt like dark as a reader, but also, yeah, I could see that happening.
Yeah.
Right. And actually I got dinged for that part of it, but I'm like,
really?
Oh, like I get dinged for a lot of the stuff that I'm like, okay, but that would really happen in the real world.
Yeah.
It's like, like I'm a mom of 3 kids and everything else. But if I was in Drew's position and like the financial pressures and the work pressures and the no sleep, and then I had this figure who was just, controlling every aspect of my life and not letting me sleep and not letting me eat. And, you're going to do stupid stuff.
I'm honestly surprised at that, because I do feel like when I read it, it was traumatic and it made me feel for her, because you're like, don't do that. But then you're also like, but it makes sense. It makes sense for the character. It makes sense for the path. And it made that angsty stressor so much more real.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. And a lot of times I feel like a lot of times readers will at least say that they want like these characters who are so strong and they're so this and they're so that. But, a character's got to start off with some weaknesses, because then otherwise there's nothing to overcome. And if they were this perfect human at the start, then there would never be any reason for them to not be with this love interest, right? Like they would never have made all the mistakes that led them to the start of the story. So I have one of my very best friends who reads all my books is always like, I just wish she wasn't so weak. I wish she would just be, and like, they all can't be badasses from like page one. Like they got to build up to it.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. Because then where's the character development? What's the journey they go on?
Yeah.
Where's the journey? So speaking of characters, we have our favorites from the books that we've read, but we'd love to hear from your perspective. If you could be friends in real life with any of these characters, who would you choose to be friends with in real life?
Real life, it would probably be Tally from A Deal with the Devil.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Because she's just kind of just like, she's smart and she's funny.
I love that. I love Gemma. Like, I think she'd be a great friend. She'd really be there for you, and Drew.
Yeah.
I actually would pick Keely because when I read that book, she actually reminded me of a friend I actually have. So when I was talking to Sheridan about it, when I got to that book, I was like, oh my God, she reminds me of so-and-so. And it was like weirdly relatable for me because I was like, I know her. Like I feel like she's a friend I actually have who's just like the quirky, supportive, but just like living in a totally different land than everybody else.
Well, and the funny thing is,
and we love it.
Keely, of all the heroines in that series, Keely got ripped on the most, and she's so irresponsible, and she's this. And I was like, I based a lot of that character on myself, like her eating habits and how messy she is, and like her viewing habits. And I was like, oh, so I'm like, that was probably most like me of any character.
It's probably the first character that I felt like I genuinely know this person. Like I have this person in my life and I can totally understand. And especially like, I feel like Sheridan and I are more type A-ish people. So when you have that type of friend, it's like, they're always like the balance to your group, if you will.
Right.
It's like,
for
sure.
Like
keeps the chaos coming and you're just like, I want to fix this so bad, but this is just you. And that's okay.
I am actually in my friend group, I am the one who keeps the chaos coming. So
and we love that. And we love it.
Yeah.
And we love it.
Yeah. She's my friend I refer to as the tornado because she comes in and everything's just like a mess and she leaves and I'm just like, it's fine, I'm ready.
And we love it. Okay, with that being said, who's your favorite male main character? Like
Ben.
Okay.
Ben.
Okay.
I feel like he's my pick too. I love Ben so much.
Ooh.
Ben and then Henri, the last two books in the parallel series, Across Time and Across Eternity, Henri is like my end all be all. But of the books that everyone has read, it's Ben.
Okay. Josh for me. Josh is my favorite of your male main
such a good
characters.
one.
Yes.
It's like, that was the only reason I wanted Ben's point of view was because I loved him so much that I was like, I just wish I got to live in his head more, but I totally understand why you did what you did. But I was like, I just wanted to be with Ben more.
And I'm trying to, I don't want to swear to this, but I'm pretty sure so the books are all being released by Entangled, right? This summer and this fall. And I had to write a bonus for each one of those books. And I'm pretty sure that The Devil You Know, the bonus is from Ben's point of view.
Yes. Ooh,
in fact, I know it is because I had said in the reader group that I was going to write more because I did like a little thing of from his point of view. And then I wrote this really good one and I felt really bad that I couldn't share it because I had to give it to Entangled. So yeah.
I'm so excited because that was literally the only thing is I loved him so much. I was like, I just wanted to live in your head like just a little bit longer because you were such a good because you love him from Drew's book, which is something that I love about interconnected standalones is you see somebody and like by the time you know he's the next book, you're like, yes, I am ready for you. Like I am so excited for you. And he was the one in Drew's book where you're like, give me more. So is Entangled the one that is doing your sprayed edge releases?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm so excited for those.
Yeah. So they brought the print right. Oh, I'm excited. I can't wait to see my books in Target.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I saw that and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be I set like the pre-order ready because I was like, I need to be ready to get all of these because it's one of my favorites.
Yeah. Because they're only doing a limited run with the sprayed edges and yeah.
I'm so excited.
Very excited.
That's amazing. Okay, so something we love about your books is, we've touched on this a little bit, the journey that the characters go on, right? Something that you do really well as an author is at the end of the book, they've had this really surprising character journey that gives a lot of payoff to the reader. Do you ever feel that there's like a challenge with writing a specific character's journey?
I mean, yeah, but I almost always like I said, that's why it takes me so long to write, is because I'm like, as soon as I come up with some kind of idea, I'm like, nope. We're starting from scratch.
Yeah.
I'm like really starting from scratch. Like, I think there's a one book, Drowning Aaron, where I was like, I think I wrote like 31 versions of that book. Like, which I try not to do that anymore because I would like to make money, and you can't do that if you're writing 31 versions of the book. But yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Okay, so if someone who is listening has never read any of your books before, what would you recommend as the first book to say, like, this is me? Start here.
A Deal with the Devil.
Yeah. That's it's fantastic.
It is.
Okay, so earlier we talked about your love of Twilight, which Jordan and I also loved Twilight. We were obsessed. It
was our first bookish love together.
It was. Can we ask, were you Team Edward or were you Team Jacob?
I don't know how anyone could be Team Jacob. Were you guys Team Jacob?
I mean, I was.
Oh my God. Right now.
It's been so long, I don't even really remember why, but I
It was his long hair.
It was.
High school Sheridan loved long hair, so Jacob came out with the long hair, and I feel like it didn't matter what else happened.
Yeah. Basically.
It's possible, like, I'm conflating now the movie with the book, but I know that I was always Team Edward no matter what. But especially, like, I thought the guy who played Jacob in the movie was just, like, not at all attractive. So that ruined it for me. Like, I was like, any shot that Jacob had is now done.
Okay. Now, has your perspective changed at all over time? Because, like, I feel like revisiting the series, to me, I now feel like I was a firm Team Edward. Like, Sheridan and I, like, this was a fighting point throughout high school for us. Whereas now I feel like rewatching it, I'm like, yo, maybe Jacob was a better choice.
Yes. I am remembering some things, and I seem to remember she was happier with Jacob. Like, Edward caused some depression.
I have to say that, like rewatching it with my teenage daughter.
Yes.
I'm thinking, like, the thing where he, like, removes, like, the spark plugs from her car so she can't leave her home. Like, before I had a teenage daughter, I was like, oh, that's so hot. And now I'm like, I even told my daughters, if any guy did that, he would be.
Yeah.
Like, always my thing is we're watching TV together, and I'm like, you bring that guy home, he's going to sleep.
Yes. That's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like I rewatched it when I had my daughter, and I was like, if she brought this fool home, like, I would be way worse than Charlie. Like, there would have been no like that. Not in my house, kid.
But, like, he's standing in her window watching her sleep.
Yeah.
Like,
she's there for 4 months in a chair. Doesn't leave.
Yeah.
Never again, sir. Not in my home. Like, get out.
Jacob would have treated her well, but we won't even speak about where the story goes with Jacob. We're just going to move past that. But with that being said, outside of that series, currently, do you have any authors for you that are auto-buys? Like, when they release a book, they're an auto-buy and you love them as an author.
Allie Hazelwood, can't miss.
Oh, yes. Agreed.
Yeah. And I just read that new one, and that one was so good. And I loved Bride. Like, I was, like, a lot of times, like, you when somebody switches genre, you're like, is she gonna be able to pull this off? And she pulled it off. That was like the best paranormal all year.
Yeah. We loved Bride, especially, like, I thought Misery, being such a grumpy female character, was so well written that you were like, okay, like, usually you get kind of peeved being in that point of view, but I was like, no, this I'd be angry too.
Yeah, her anger was justified. I also love The Love Hypothesis, and Love on the Brain, Love Theoretically. Yeah, she's got some great ones. I love her STEM romances.
And that's the funny thing. I made my daughter read the first in that series, and she's like, same with Hating Game. I made her read The Hating Game, which is like my favorite book. And she's like, nothing's happening. I'm like, what do you mean nothing's happening? But she's like a Court of Thorns and Roses girl. Like, she wants, like, wings to come and fight. I like the more realistic.
I do think that there are some books that like Lucy Score's one of the authors that comes to mind, where they write so much about growing as a person, you know, trying to change in life, change their circumstances. So if that's not your cup of tea, it can feel like nothing's happening. Whereas you're like, look at like how inspirational this is deep down, like dig in there and see what they're
Right.
telling you, you know? So this is something we talk about all the time, where you read a book one time and you're like, no, I don't like that book. And then you revisit it later and you're like, why did I hate this book? This book is amazing.
Yeah.
Have you ever like done a reread like that where you've changed your mind or changed your perspective?
You know what book I just was like, the first time I read it, and then I reread it like a couple years later, and I was like, I can't get enough of this book, was Outlander.
Oh.
Oh.
I know it's shocking, but the first time I read that book, I was just like, what is this? Like, I was just like, good Lord. And I think part of it was that my mother-in-law had given me that book, and there's like a male rape scene, and I was just like, oh,
Yeah.
like you don't want that from your mother-in-law.
This is actually wild. I love Outlander. I love the books. I love the TV show. I kept with it. But when someone's like, "Have you read Outlander?" That is the first scene I think of, because it is extremely traumatic. So I can imagine your mother-in-law giving you that book and then you being like, do you wish to discuss like what? So I get it. But
Like, I had no warning, and she was like, "Wasn't it such a good book?" And I was like,
okay.
But then I read it a couple years later, and I still distinctly remember that I was reading it. I had it in my lap open while I was driving. Like, that's how into it I was. And I was going slow, but I was literally trying to read it while I was driving. I'm like, this is not safe, but yeah. So that's it.
I just think it's so interesting because it is crazy how like a point in time in your life can change how you look at something like that. And we talk about that all the time of like, how many things have I written off that I need to go back and just like revisit because it could be my next love and I had no idea because it was just not right time, right place.
It's like, that's the beauty of reading and the joy of like also mood reading, because our perspectives do change. So we find new loves, and absolutely. Okay. If it's all right with you, could we play some Would You Rather games with your characters?
Sure.
Okay, cool. We're excited. Would you rather hike the Kalalau Trail with Josh or work for Hayes?
I would love to hike that trail. I've hiked part of it. So yeah, that's an easy one. I would hike that trail.
Oh, okay, cool. I mean, it sounds gorgeous. Kauai, like on the island of Kauai. I mean, this trail sounds beautiful. So, and working for Hayes sounds difficult. So, yes.
Oh yeah, I would quit on the first day, or I'd get fired. I would get fired the very first day.
Okay. Would you rather confront a cheating ex like Tally or spend an entire vacation with an ex's family like Drew?
I would rather just confront like Tally. Like, the idea of doing a vacation with an ex's family sounds awful.
Yes.
Agreed.
She's so go with the flow about it too. When they're like, no, you need to stay. I'd have been out. I'd have been like, oh, you see, I messed up my schedule and the way that it was, it's not the way that it is.
Agreed. Would you rather have Hayes ghostwrite your novels or work with Ben on a high pressure case?
Oh, I'd much rather work with Ben. I mean, Hayes would just turn it all into like girl on girl action, and it would be nonstop. And yeah.
Okay. Would you rather have Drew's diet at the beginning of the book or Keely's diet?
I can't remember what Drew's diet was.
She doesn't get to eat. She's starving.
Oh.
She's pretty much like always scared to eat. So I was like, oh my God, you have two like night and days.
Right. They were on her about her weight. So I feel like I currently have Keely's diet. So it would probably be good for me to do Drew's diet for a while. I would be forced. But yeah, if it's a matter of willpower, then I'm going to have Keely's diet.
Same here.
For sure. Awesome. Well, that is everything we have. Is there anything you would like to plug before we move on?
Everybody take a look at my favorite bad decision. I'm really thrilled with this book, and there's lots of banter and enemies to lovers and one tent action. So
Ooh. Not
okay.
even a bed,
Yeah.
one tent. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We had an awesome time. They can check you out on Instagram and TikTok, Elizabeth O'Rourke. And we are at Sippin on Spice on TikTok and Instagram. And we hope to see you next week.